Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Theology in the Raw. Today is a Q&A podcast where my Patreon supporters send in a bunch of questions and they actually vote on the questions to see which ones they want me to address. And so I have a whole list of questions I'm going to address on this podcast. What you're going to get is a sneak preview of the first few questions. If you want to listen to the rest of my responses to these questions, you can go to patreon.com/Theology Raw, sign up to be a Patreon supporter, and get access to the full-length podcast episode of this Q&A podcast. So some of the questions we're going to wrestle with are my thoughts on Jackie Hill Perry's recent denouncement of the Enneagram as demonic. What does my personal quiet time look like? Do the divisions in 1 Corinthians apply to the concept of denominations? Do I have a theology of dinosaurs? Quite frankly, I'm surprised it's taken this long for somebody to ask me about my theology of dinosaurs. Is the ESV translation biased against women in leadership? Did Jesus think the Bible is divinely inspired? Do I believe in saving for retirement? What's my take on Andy Stanley's kerfluffle? And does 1 Corinthians 5 say we should divide from affirming gay Christians? And there's several other questions that I addressed. So let's jump in with our first question. And it goes like this. Jackie Hill Perry recently denounced the Enneagram as demonic in origin. What do I think why do I think the broader Christian community has so casually embraced the Enneagram? Great question. I wasn't aware of this actually. I followed Jackie pretty closely on Instagram and her podcasts, and I must have missed this one. So I went back and had to watch the 5-minute video. And it's funny, one of those things. Once I kind of found out about Jackie and her take on the Enneagram, of course, now I hear it from everybody. Like, what do you think about Jackie Hill Perry's take? What do you think about Jackie's take? So I had to do a bit of research. First of all, as some of you know, I consider Jackie a friend. She's been on the podcast. She's spoken at my conferences, at my conference, singular, and been on webinars. And I value her voice so incredibly much. Absolutely love her books. And it's with that context that I looked into this, because I would say how would I say? I use the Enneagram very mildly, meaning it comes up very casually in conversations. Oh, so what number are you? What's your wing? We kind of talk about it, get a feel for who, how someone's wired or whatever. But I couldn't tell you much details at all about the Enneagram. I have found it to be a helpful tool to think through broad categories of personalities. That's about it. Some people are just, they're so into it. They think this is just the best thing ever. And other people hate it as demonic. And I guess I'm maybe somewhere in between. I don't know if in between would be the right phrase, but I have found it to be a helpful tool, kind of no more, no less. I do tell you that Jackie's post did make me think about how often do I refer to it? And I would say I do kind of refer to it quite often. I do, I feel like in conversations with people, it very quickly comes up what people's numbers are, what their wing is, all this stuff. So even though I haven't done a lot of research into it, it does come up quite a bit in my conversations now that I kind of self-reflect. So Jackie did a bunch of study. She got away for a couple of days, did a ton of study on the Enneagram, and concluded that it has, just really suspicious, if not demonic, origins. And her post is really compelling. And so I was kind of like, shoot, all right, well, maybe I need to rethink everything here. I did do some research into the Enneagram, not nearly as much as Jackie. Okay, so what you're going to hear from me, I would say, believe Jackie over me if there's any kind of potential disagreement here. There has been, I guess, rumors about one of the, and again, I don't even know if he's the creator, one of the founders, or just one of the early gurus of the Enneagram, but a guy named Oscar Ichazo, I think is how you say his name. And there was rumors that he received the Enneagram from an angel or spirit named Metatron, which I thought was a transformer, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's a pretty well-known name for a spirit being. And so that's a little suspicious. I'm like, okay, well, this guy's kind of the main founders, gurus, architects of the Enneagram. And he says he got it from a demon. Yeah, that'd be a little like suspicious, I guess. But then I did a little research on this, and he came out and said that this rumor was wrong. He denounced it. He said, I did not receive this knowledge from an angel or any other source, but from a careful study of the human psyche. I forget what he said. That's some letter he wrote in response to this. So, and again, I'm not claiming that denouncement is even, the best evidence. I'm just saying that the evidence for him receiving this from an angel, let's just be really super cautious and say, well, it's a little complicated and mixed maybe. So I don't think from the little study I've done, we can simply say for sure that he claimed that it came from a demon. There's another psychologist named Naranjo, who was a student of Echazo, who said in I believe it was a 2010 interview, that he got the Enneagram from automatic writing. Automatic writing. He didn't really go into detail what that is, so I had to Google it. And according to Wiki, okay, it's Wiki, so it's Wiki. Don't use Wiki in your formal research. It's a great kind of quick tool to get a quick perspective on stuff. So anyway, Wiki says that automatic writing is some kind of like subconscious writing, which allows a person to produce written words without consciously writing. Okay, so just kind of like, I don't know, you're in some kind of trance with a pen in your hand or something, and it's just kind of your hand just kind of goes for it. I guess, I don't know. Practitioners sometimes engage in automatic writing. They do so by holding a written instrument and allowing alleged spirits to manipulate the practitioner's hand. Okay, so that sounds a little suspicious. Now, Naranjo in the interview didn't go into detail about it. He just kind of mentioned automatic writing, and from what I've heard others say, automatic writing can kind of mean different things to different people. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's claiming he was in some kind of like demonic trance while he was writing out all this stuff about the Enneagram. Also, apparently he's been teaching the Enneagram for 40 years before he made that claim. Like, it was kind of a shock when he said that. Like, he's been teaching this for many years. He also, Naranjo has a doctorate. He studied at Harvard and Berkeley, and he actually studied personality types at like Harvard and Berkeley. So the guy has loads of psychological knowledge on personality types. So I don't know. So here's where, whatever that claim is, whatever automatic writing is, he could also be, when he does write and talk about the Enneagram, drawing on loads of psychological, like maybe we can say legitimate psychological sources. Plus, there's stuff in the Enneagram, a lot of stuff from again, cross-check everything I'm saying. I'm not the expert at all. From what I can tell, there's a lot of stuff in the Enneagram that does predate Naranjo in the first place. There's a pastor online that I found a lot of good information on, Tyler Zach. I don't know who he is. Seems like a great, super humble guy. He seems to be well learned on the Enneagram, and I found some stuff that he was addressing the alleged demonic origins of the Enneagram. So I found that to be really helpful. I treat the Enneagram kind of like other personality tests. I think they can be helpful tools. I think they can be overused as well, and I think I love Jackie's point at the end of her video about Christians using the Enneagram as kind of like a more significant descriptor of their identity than their identity in Christ. Like, when any kind of like personality test, conflicts with the biblical worldview, I think that, that's problematic. Or people use the Enneagram as like as like an excuse for unvirtuous behavior. I don't even know if there's a number for shyness. Is it like a 5 or a, I don't know. That's a bad example. I was going to say I'm an Enneagram 5, and so I don't really want to ask people questions. I just want to kind of read some books or whatever. That's probably a bad description of 5. I might even be a 5, and that doesn't really describe me too well. But or a 9. Okay, 9s are like peacemakers, right? They don't like conflict. Well, sometimes righteous behavior might take you to places of conflict. So you can't say, "Oh, no, I'm a 9. I don't do that." Well, no, you're a Christian first, so yes, there might be times to do that, if it's the right thing to do. So, so when in any kind of personality test takes precedent over your Christian identity and what that identity calls you to, then I think that's problematic. And I So yeah, to me that was for me the most helpful point that Jackie raised, which I 100% agree with. Yeah, so I don't see the Enneagram personally as like way better than other personality types. I've gone through the DISC profile, DISC, which I found helpful. I did Strength Finders, which is really thorough. Enneagram's kind of a quick and easy, reference point for me, but I don't know. I haven't been convinced that Enneagram is like way better than all the others, or different, or spiritual in origin in a good way, or necessarily in a bad way. So, Jackie's caused me to think about it, and I think we're due to have a conversation to kind of talk through a little more, because I do have some questions about that. But I found the origins of the Enneagram a bit complicated for me to simply toss it out just yet. And also, I mean, I'm not always convinced that even the origins of something determines whether the thing we're talking about is necessarily wrong, bad, or unhelpful. I mean, we have like the origins of a lot of the proverbs are in just ancient Near East wisdom as a whole. Of course, it's divinely inspired, but it's also drawing on ancient wisdom. There's a lot of parallels, for instance, between ancient Egyptian wisdom literature, wisdom texts, and Egyptian proverbs and the Book of Proverbs. I went through this a lot when I was in seminary, when we would kind of evaluate the legitimacy of other scholars and their commentaries or their books based on where they went to seminary or where they studied, and be like, well, that person did go to Fuller, so they're going to be, I'm like, well, maybe, but shouldn't we judge the legitimacy of what somebody is saying and producing and doing based on the content of what they're doing and saying and producing, not simply where they went to school, 40 years ago or whatever? People do that to me. They look at my checkered educational history and might say, wow, you must be. I'm like, well, judge me based on what I'm actually saying and believing, not the origins of my educational experience. So I don't always, and this comes up with like CRT, right? To take a really quick turn. People say, well, the origins are Marxist and this is, and like, okay, maybe that there can be some help, and that may be helpful to look at the origins, but at the end of the day, I just simply denounce something based on the origins. I think we need to also look at the content of what we're denouncing and see if that is actually unhelpful or bad or shouldn't be listened to. Okay, next question. What does my personal quiet time or Bible study look like? How long? What plan? What time of the day? Your approach? How often? Etc. Great question. I would say if I look back over my last 10 years, maybe. How far back do you want to go? It's been different in different seasons. When I was doing my okay, here's gonna be my hardcore days. Back when I was doing my PhD, I think I'd get up at like 4 a.m, maybe 4:30. I think I set my alarm for, maybe 4 o'clock. And part of it is because we had tiny little kids at home. The sun in the wintertime went down at like 3:30 in Scotland. And my wife was like, is there any way you can get home where there's a little bit of daylight left and, hang out with the kids, play with them outside, whatever, before the sun goes down? So I said, well, if I just alter my schedule, then yeah, I need to get in. I think I was trying to do like 10 hours a day of research, 10, 12 hours a day of research. And so I would get up at like 3:30 or 4, and I would spend like 45 minutes to an hour. And back then I would read a chunk of the Old Testament in Hebrew, a chunk of the New Testament in Greek, just because it was the original languages were so fresh in my mind. And to me, that was like, I don't know, it's an invigorating way to start the day by digging into kind of like really specific nuances in the text. I have tried various Bible reading plans where I'm doing like 3 chapters a day, and typically I try to do that in the morning. I don't think I've ever finished a 1-year Bible plan. I've gotten like halfway through the year, and then stuff happens, and you fall behind, you get discouraged, and next thing you know, you're like 16 chapters of Leviticus to read before tomorrow morning, and it's your kid's birthday, and you're like, sorry, I got to, stay up late tonight to read Leviticus because I have to get and I just found, I don't know, for me personally, maybe it's because of my life or maybe it's just, I'm just an idiot, I don't know. But I just always find myself, a couple of days of falling behind. Next thing you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I try to blow through this and make it up, then am I really doing what I should be doing? So I have never stuck with a 1-year Bible plan. I would say right now, here's my ideal day. So you might be hearing, I'm not consistent. That's the big answer to your question. I'm not consistent. On a good day, I'm up at 6 or 6:30 with an alarm. I'm not a morning person. If I don't set an alarm, I'll wake up at 8:30. I'm not. It's hard for me to get out of bed. So if I want to get up early, 6:30, I'm typically right now. Typically read some Bible and then some other book. Not necessarily for well, sometimes it's connected to my research, but I'm not researching with my computer open. I'm reading. I'm trying to reflect. Sometimes I'll if it's a theology book, I'll be kind of going back to passages that the book is looking at. Like right now, I'm digging into the book of Revelation, kind of political readings of Revelation. So I might go back to certain passages. Like I spent the last few days in Revelation 12 to 14. So kind of reading the text and then maybe going to a commentary type book and then seeing what they say about the passage and going back and looking at the text. So I don't have any kind of like, make sure I get through this chapter today. It's just kind of like, I don't know, spend some time in the text informally. And then I'll spend on a good day, some time in prayer. Sometimes I look at the time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get to work and I don't pray, which is bad. I should prioritize prayer because the Bible study part comes easier than the prayer part. So gosh, I'm counseling myself here. My own therapist. I should probably start with prayer because that's the one that's going to go that I'm not going to get to. If all of a sudden I feel like I need to get to work really quickly or whatever. So I did a fellow PhD student when I was doing my PhD a couple decades ago. I was kind of frantically like, oh, how can I make sure I'm having my devotional time, in like on top of my PhD studies. And he was like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, I want to read the Bible, for spiritual nourishment, not just for research. And he's like, well, you're a Christian. Your research times in the Bible should also be devotional, and your devotional time should also be thoughtful. So he kind of pushed back, or not pushed back. He was just kind of like expanded my mind to realize that like, it's probably more helpful just whenever you open the text, whenever you're thinking about the text, to be both thoughtful and devotional. Like, because I've tried the whole, like, reading books that are just kind of fluffy. They're just kind of airy. They're kind of just not really scholarly, and I just have a hard time with that kind of like quote unquote traditional devotional literature. I can't shut my mind off when I'm thinking about the Bible, and I don't think I should, So at the same time, when my mind is cranking on all 3 cylinders or however many I got up there, like I also need to be not just reading the Bible for an academic, pursuit. I'm ultimately, anytime I open the text, whether I'm doing Greek and Hebrew word studies or reading whatever, like my ultimate goal is to be formed in the likeness of Christ, whether through deep study or quote unquote devotional study. So I've learned to try to like merge the two. And because my life is oriented around studying the Bible, I try to have my devotional hat on, at least a window up in the back of my mind, my devotional window up, to use a computer analogy. I try to always have that up, always be thinking, how is this forming me into the likeness of Christ? Okay, next question. Does 1 Corinthians 1, talking about divisions among the people, apply to the concept of denominations? Is it biblical to have these splits within the church? I don't think 1 Corinthians 1 could be directly mapped upon modern day denominations. I mean, it's talking about disunity within local house churches in Corinth. And they were dividing largely around, various factions forming around certain leaders, and there was a lot of pride involved, and a lot of there's more socioeconomic stuff going on there as well. I think that some of the division around leaders had to do with this kind of a patron-client system where some of these where they were kind of treating these various leaders as patrons, and they were kind of forming clients around them, and it gets a little complicated there. But I all that to say, I think there's some unique stuff going on in 1 Corinthians 1, or really it's 1 Corinthians 1-4 as a whole. Talks about these divisions. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed this portion of the Patreon-only Q&A podcast. If you would like to listen to the full-length episode and receive other bonus content like monthly podcasts, opportunities to ask questions, access to first drafts of my research, and monthly Zoom chats and more, then please head over to patreon.com/Theology in the Raw to join Theology in the Raw's Patreon community. That's patreon.com/Theology in the Raw.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.